This presentation is by way of payback for all those other people that have spent so much time putting up their own experience on YouTube, from which I've learned an awful lot. This is my imaging rig. This is a C14, almost 4 meters of focal length, 50 pounds of weight. Great at photographing galaxies. It's a beast that can be tamed for astrophotography, but you've just got to work a little bit harder at it. Has to sit on a beefy mount, and there it is, Skywatcher EQ8. A bit agricultural looking, but an excellent tracker. Very happy with it, well worth the money, and not a moment's trouble in 2.5 years. Equally, that has to sit on something very sturdy, and here it is. It's an Altair Starbase, kind of peer tripod arrangement, British made. Beautiful piece of work, extremely well engineered, lightweight to carry, very portable, and very, very strong indeed. But of course, without accessories, nothing really works. The dew shield, yeah, your corrector plate's going to dew up very readily, even with your dew control running at full pelt. This is a cheap AstroZap dew shield with a thermal camping mat just glued onto it. Never had a dew problem since. There's a counterweight on the declination shaft. Nobody wants to push a C14 up in that dovetail bracket. The counterweight there with the clamps, funny looking, but it's to really offset that motor controller on the right hand side. That means that when I do balance the scope, and balance is important, we can achieve a fine result with my little clamps and ADM weight on the handle. Pull master camera there. The pull master camera gets me within 30 arc seconds of the pull very regularly. One of the best £300 I've ever spent in astronomy. Forget spending an hour drift aligning, that will do it just as well for you. The back end, the camera is an Atik 460EX. The sensor is about 12.5mm by 10mm. Not huge, but good for my purposes. The filter wheel there is a cheap Zygle one, Canadian filter wheel, 5 positions, 1.25 filters, fine at my focal ratio. The off-axis guide there is Celestron, the new model, very beefy model. I really like it, but it is very, very big. It suits me, but some people find the spacing very difficult. The focal reducer is Celestron, an old one, 6.3, perfectly adequate, Japanese made. And that visual back there, beautifully engineered, isn't it, is an astrophysics one, specially designed for a C14. I just love it. The auto guider we can just about see there we are, is a recent acquisition, a Lodestar X2. Very sensitive, much more than my old ZWO camera, which we'll see in a minute. Never fails to pick up a guide star. I don't have to rotate anything with my off-axis guider. I find guide stars, even when operating robotically with Sequence Generator Pro. Okay, you might think the cables look untidy. Let me assure you they're very tidy at the moment, thanks to this, the Pegasus Ultimate Power Hub, bought from Greece. Very, very handy, industrial grade USB hub. Also the power outlet, so the mount is powered through there. The camera is, there are all the gizmos, USB leads going straight in there. It's not missed a heartbeat in 3 months that I've had it. Very, very good. It's been a very good solution to all my cable clutter. And you will notice down there where the focus knob should be on a Schmidt Cassegrain, I have a motor. Yes, I focus directly on the primary. There's no Crayford here, and I find this can work very efficiently if you basically take care. And the focus controller is, yes, you guessed it, is going back to the Pegasus hub, because that does focus control too. And that alone's got rid of 3 cables I previously had. And there it is in all its glory, stood in the garden. I don't have an observatory. This is packed up and taken to dark sky sites. They're the azimuth knobs, rather beautiful. Not the factory ones, these are nicer ones made by a good friend of mine. And the whole rig is controlled by a mini computer, £125 worth, which has proven itself very adequate to the task. And I use Wi-Fi to control from indoors. There's the old guiding camera, the ZWO, there with an acrylic hub on it, bought from eBay, and a picnic container, and this is so I can keep an eye on the scope while I'm inside. I always trust my eyes. Okay, let's go inside. The whole thing is controlled by Sequence Generator Pro, and this is a live screen grab of an imaging session of the Dumbbell Nebula, and there it is, looking very nice in HA, I must say. Sequence Generator Pro actually dovetails very nicely with PhD, fortunately, because that's the guiding program I've used for years. Guiding tonight's very good, I think you'll agree with that. And let's have a quick romp around some of the features. This is, before we do that, the ultimate Power Hub interface. Again, very nicely laid out, I must say. Everything you need to know is there: the current drain, the voltage, temperature outside, humidity outside, the what's being drawn. You could do all sorts of things there. Auto dew, yes, it'll do auto dew. Run the dew bands just enough to stop the formation of dew on the corrector. Power graph, yep, you can trace how much power we're being used. Environmental graph, temperature, humidity. And it does a few more things as well. In fact, you can even completely reboot the USB hub by just pressing one of those buttons rather than unplugging everything, which is a very valuable thing with USB hubs. So very pleased with it. I can recommend it. £500 is not cheap, but it is money well spent in my opinion. Get rid of that and go back into our live imaging session. And this time let's have a romp through some of the features of this program. Okay, if we go to the top, the cooler, you can cool down the temperature to whatever you want, self-explanatory. Frame and focus, get your target there before you actually go and take your sequence. Filter wheel, yeah, I mentioned a filter wheel. This is an update on the status we are at the moment in terms of sequence, M27. There's another sequence after this I've got planned, the Wizard Nebula, and we'll show you how we go from here to there. There's the update on what we're doing. Over here, image statistics, and the one I'm particularly interested in is how fat the stars are, and that's the half flux radius. The slimmer the star, the better focused. And the red line at the top is the number of stars seen in the image. We want as many stars as possible because it means we're finely focused. And the blue line is the half flux radius, the fatness of the stars. We want that to be rather low. If we just go up a little bit more, we'll go up to the focusing panel. Autofocusing is very important for me. One of the ideas I had was to really automate the scope's operation so I can go off and chat, have a drink, or even do the visual thing. And the temperature drops significantly at night where I live, so I need to be able to autofocus. And this is what this does. It's all about getting the settings right, and I'm not going to do a special presentation on that in this particular vid. It'd take too long, but these are some of the settings I use to image with a C14 at something like 2.3 meters focal length when focal reduced. This is the regime about telling the program when I want to refocus, when we've dropped a degree, or whether we've slewed a distance from one side of the sky to the other. Because again, the mirror in the back of a C14 can just be unseated very, very slightly, but enough to throw the focus. I found autofocusing on good, sensible, clear nights to be quite reliable. Histogram there, and let's have a quick look at the sequencer itself, the heart of the program if you like. These are all targets on the left hand side. I'm not doing all these tonight, I don't have enough time, but I'm going to do a few, and they're the ones with the ticks. Down below you can just enter what exposures you want, what filter you want to use, what binning, and how many of those you want to do. Compared with other programs I've used, this is child's play. It's very well laid out. Sequence Generator Pro has been around for a long time. Its interface has always been excellent, and once you get into it, it's readily understandable. This is another lovely feature of Sequence Generator Pro. This is a framing and mosaic wizard. Put the object you want to view into the top title bar, M27. It'll produce a picture for you. Draw a frame around it, and it'll give you an indication of what you'll get with your sensor arrangement. If you want to do a mosaic, draw a bigger rectangle, and it'll break down into 4 panes and set up sequences. So the scope will automatically sew to each pane, and then you can integrate them in another piece of software after the event. So there we are, there's M57, that's a ring nebula, isn't it? One or two other targets I may well have a go at, and this is the Heart and Soul Nebula. This is how it would look if I did it in 2 panels. Remember, I've got quite a narrow field of view, so mosaics work quite well for me. I get a bit more real estate than is inherent in my setup. So yeah, it's a very, very useful feature, and that very, very quickly is the Elephant Trunk Nebula, and that's something I did the other night. 1, 2, 3 straight down, and I got some encouraging results from that, which pushes me on to try even more. Okay, what we'll do is we'll have a quick look under the bonnet a little bit more. The control panel is where you get the settings right to make the program work for your particular setup. You fill these tabs in, really, I suppose it's a once only thing, you know, your telescope focal length, that kind of thing. If we go on to PlateSolve in a minute, PlateSolve is a very important aspect of what we do here, because this is a robotic program, if you like. It allows you to stand off and let the program do very much what it needs to do. And they're the various PlateSolve programs that are included. Pinpoint, actually, you have to pay for. But I use PlateSolve too. What anybody needs anything else, I don't know. It's been excellent for me. These are the auto-guiding programs it's compatible with. I use PhD. Some of the settings on the right, self-explanatory. Well, I don't really want to guide if I'm autofocusing, so we stop the guiding for that duration. Over there on the left, you can, if you want, dither. It's up to you whether you dither or not. I've not got it set up to dither. And lower down from that, when we come down a second or two, there we are. I want the guider to be very settled before a sequence starts, so I stipulate the guider doesn't move any more than 0.8 of a pixel over 20 seconds, and that is good enough for me. If you've got an observatory, this is what you fill in. I don't have an observatory. My rig gets torn down occasionally and gets taken off to dark sky sites, but if you do have an observatory, you can slave it to the program. Okay, let's get back to our imaging session. There's the dumbbell. There's the latest sub that's about to come down from the sky. It's downloading there, and you notice on the right hand side it'll give me a new half flux radius. So we're seeing whether the stars are getting fatter or thinner as the evening progresses. And now we are going to have an autofocus run. And that's because the temperature has dropped by more than 1 degree. And if you remember, that's one of my stipulations for the program invoking autofocus. And this is the autofocus panel. And you will notice we've not moved away. We are focusing on the subject and the stars around what we're actually looking at. The principle of this is that the focus will move out by a measured degree way beyond focus, and then it'll go through best focus and then beyond it on the other side. And if you interpret all that with a graph and things work well, you end up with a V curve, and the lowest point is a point of best focus. Okay, so that's what we intend to achieve. And it does this by moving the focus around, as I've said, and each step's worth about 110 clicks. And then it takes a 6-second exposure through a red filter, measures how fat the stars are, or more correctly termed the half flux radius, and presents a figure and plots it on a graph. So you can see the image there in the center of the screen. As we get into better focus, we see more and more stars. That's what happens when you get back into focus. So star numbers and the HFR are what we look at in those imaging statistics. This takes, I don't know, about a couple of minutes, I suppose. It adds to the overall time of imaging. It's an overhead, if you like, when you run a sequence. But it's probably quite important to be well focused. Why spend all that much money and time and effort on your equipment if you're going to run it when you're often out of focus? C14 working at 2.3 meters is going to get out of focus as temperatures drop or rise through the night. So far I can see this is going to be a nice V curve. If there was cloud moving across or a bit too much breeze, it doesn't like that very much. Quick view there of my all-sky camera outside. As I mentioned to you earlier, I like to keep an eye on the telescope just in case it goes off on a wild slew, which it doesn't really. My telescope, a previous mount, did, but this doesn't. And it also allows me to keep a tab on sky conditions, cloud moving on through that might alter this V curve and make it less useful. So again, we've passed through the point of best focus and we're on the way on the other side, and we should have a nice shape V curve. I rather misled you by saying it chooses the point of lowest focus. That's not actually what it does. What it does do is find a line of best fit down the right hand side and then down the left hand side, and where they intersect is the point of best focus. I use 11 exposures for the autofocus routine. You can use 9, you can use 13, some people use 5. I like 11 because any spurious readings count for that much less. You had a quick view there of PHD, and you might have noticed the PHD is being temporarily disabled while we go through the autofocus regime. And probably I need to emphasize at this point, all I'm actually doing here is commentating. I've not touched this, I've not done anything with it. It's gone in its own merry way, and it'll spend the next few hours happily taking sequences and going through these essential bits of housekeeping such as autofocusing and guiding. Well, that's that. So we've come out with a slightly different, but not very much, autofocus position. The machine, the program is now preparing to get back onto sequence, and it's changing the filter wheel back to H alpha, which is what I'm using. At this point, what's going to happen is it's going to reacquire the guide star, because we have to guide at the myfocal lengths. And as you can see, we have reacquired the guide star. It will pull it in to be on the green crosshairs. As I said, it's a night of quite good guiding tonight, very steady seeing conditions, very typical of what we've had this summer at my location. And again, once we meet the benchmark of guiding disturbance no more than 0.8 of a pixel over 20 seconds, then we're dandy and good to go, and the imaging sequence should spark up again, and we should be getting more images coming down from the sky. And at this point, I think we'll just speed the sequence on a little bit. And there we are, there's the dumbbell coming to the end of the last sub of the sequence for tonight, on the dumbbell anyway. It's always interesting to see what results you get when it comes to download. Is the guiding being okay? The stars look reasonably tight. On this occasion, yeah, everything looks fine. The dumbbell is a fine subject for HA. And here's the plate solve program invoking. It knows the next target's a Wizard Nebula, some way away. There's my little all-sky camera just perched in its picnic container underneath the scope. Plate solve is now syncing on the sky, so it knows where it's pointing before it sets it going off on its merry way. And there we are. The scope is moving. I don't like to have high resolution on that all-sky camera. Mini computer can't handle all that traffic, I wouldn't have thought. So a couple of frames per couple of seconds is enough for me to see what's happening. Plate solve program's been told to get the target within 25 pixels. In practice, with my system, it usually does that on 3 iterations. So there's a plate solve frame that's been downloaded. I think they're about 5-second frames or 6-second frames, some such like that. It takes a wee bit more time with my system because I insist on a period of about 5 or 6 seconds for the telescope just to settle down after each move, so we get point stars and not little streaks as you can do when you're carrying such a weight on a mount as I'm doing. You can see how many stars have been acquired by Planewave's Plate Solve 2. And there we are, there's the crude first go-to. We're not a million miles away, but we're certainly not close enough. So it gives it another go. In practice, you're never going to get there first time round. Well, if you do, well done. Usually it takes 2-3 iterations. Plate solving like this used to be the reserved professional observatories, but power of computers has increased, and so it's put it into the hands of anybody that really wants to use it. Astrometry.net is a completely free plate solve solution which I've used and very successfully, and plate solve 2, as I said earlier on, excellent, very, very quick. It's difficult to know what not to like about it. So that's the second plate solve, and we've got much closer, and the third one coming up, and the third one is usually the one that produces the bullseye. And that's exactly what's happened. So if everything disappears from the screen, SGP is happy it's found the target, which is a delight. It's running the auto guider, so we've slewed over to a completely different patch of the sky. It's found a star. Again, I'm not involved in this. It's found a star, working with PhD, and that's the star we're going to guide on. So it's resuming the auto guider. Usually can take a little bit of time for PhD and SGP to swap notes on how well things are guiding. But that's fine, because without guiding it wouldn't be possible to do any of this. And also, because we've slewed quite a distance, I probably didn't need to do an autofocus at this point, or program in an automatic focus. And so I could have unticked one of the boxes in the control panel. But if I'm going from one side of the meridian to the other, then you definitely would autofocus, again for the earlier mentioned issue of the mirror. So this is a bit of a repeat, so if you want to fast forward at this point, but this is going to be another V curve. But at the very least it shows you that the V curves that are being produced on this particular night are pretty much similar, and the only thing that's shifting them is the temperature of the telescope. Again, worth noting, we've not shifted to a different area where we've got a star that we focus on. That's a solution used by some other programs, typically FocusMax for instance. This focuses in situ. Always seems to me to be a great advantage if you could do that and save time. And it's taken an average of the bloat, if you like, of all those stars. If you're wondering what the square is, the white square inside the black square, well, one of the options I chose was to cut off 20% of the imaging area. Probably don't need to do that, but the edges of Schmidt-Cassegrains can exhibit coma and field curvature, and so the stars might be a little bit misshaped. I think I'm being rather anal, because my star shapes at the edges are pretty good at the moment, but nonetheless I can still pick up loads of stars, as you can see. Certainly enough to generate a very good average across the frame of just how well focused those stars are. So again, we're getting a very nice V curve. If your V curve is not like this, don't worry, because mine sometimes isn't. Conditions do rather dictate how settled all that looks. On another occasion it can be a bit zigzaggy, and some occasions you just simply can't use the autofocus. You just need to accept that the weather conditions make it impossible. Again, to reiterate, I have 11 focus points that the V-curve is made out of. On occasions I've gone up to 13, see what that's like. That takes a little bit longer. I certainly know somebody that uses 5 focus points, and that seems to me to be far too few. But it's given me a good range, if you like, and the very outer focus stars, around 3, and then you go down to the better focus stars, hitting around the 1 mark. The developers Sequence Generator Pro do say if you can get a 3:1 ratio there, you're going to get a decent shaped V-curve, and that's certainly what I found, and certainly the principle I've worked on in setting my various parameters for my gear. So there we are, there's the autofocus done. So we're autofocused on that object, that patch of sky, after all the slewing around that's been done. The focuser, the filter is now setting back to an HA again. Wizard Nebula responds to HA, means we can do this in pretty light polluted sky that represents my home. Again, always like to flick back to PhD, see what's happening there. So much depends on good guiding, and PhD is now guiding. And slowly the guiding is just simply getting better as everything settles down. PhD is one of those programs that likes to settle down. So at first, if you see a very sawtooth graph, it's well worth just giving it a bit of time. I don't know the algorithms all this is based on, but it does seem to train itself on how to tame your particular setup. I find it an excellent program. And there we are, we're back to meeting my very own benchmark, as described earlier, for produce a nice smooth guiding graph. And I feel we're almost there. This is the image history I mentioned to you earlier, but there's a more comprehensive image history. If you want to go to bed, come back later and review what happened with various focus points, temperatures, and just how well focused your stars were. Something which is very nice, gives you a very good indication straight away as to what's gone off while you've been giving it the Zs up in bed. Okay, we're now imaging the first pane in the Wizard Nebula, and when the next pane comes along, it'll do exactly the same, and this will work all night long. And I wish you the best of luck with your astrophotography adventures.